Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. My name is Danny.
And I'm Giacomo.
And this is episode 126. All right, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode. We hope everybody is doing well out there. We are under a thick cloud of Canadian wildfire smoke here in Massachusetts.
I'm wildly unaware as usual. I don't even know. I should probably be a little more cognizant of the air quality. But
I can't, so I know that the Massachusetts air quality right now is not good because my weather app tells me so, but I can't really tell, honestly. Like, I know it because I have watched the news. Although, when this first happened, one of our good friends in California texted me and was like, "How's the air?" And I was like, oxygenated? I don't know. Like, what are you talking about? And then he sent me the link about the Canadian wildfires. But other than like one night where the sunset was absolutely crazy and the sun was like hot pink as it descended, which mostly just looked cool, and I didn't even realize that was because of the smoke, I can't really tell. But Giacomo's family lives in New York City, and they are having a crazy time there.
But they're constantly paying attention to the weather because the pollution, the smog in the summer is so bad every year that you just wind up looking at the air quality just to like figure out and make sense of, is it going to be a crazy pollution day? Is it not? It's literally a thing when you live in New York City. You just grow up like that.
Your mom was telling me that from her desk at her office, when she looked outside, it was just orange. Like, it's orange out. That's scary. That's like pretty scary stuff. Ugh. So stressful to think about. But like I said, very luckily, I haven't personally noticed an impact other than our smoke alarms in our house keep randomly going off, and that could just be a coincidence. But our house has the craziest smoke alarm system that I've ever seen in a house, ever.
I'm ready to rip them out of their sockets, but I know that's the wrong idea.
They're all like wired to each other. So, and they're also the loudest fire alarms I've ever heard in my entire life. And they went off at 1 a.m. for like 20 seconds, just enough to wake you up and scare the bejesus out of you. And then they shut off. And we all just like sat there frozen, like, please don't wake up the children. And do you know they slept through that? Do you know that they slept through that?
Good. They take after their uncle. Because honestly, if it was up to me, and I know this sounds crazy, but if I were about to like die in a fire because I was going back to sleep, I'd probably just rather stay asleep than wake up.
Yeah, you say that. I saw you at 1 a.m. when it went off. You jumped up faster than I did.
Well, I was pissed. I wanted to go back to bed.
When we were staying at a Airbnb in Salt Lake City, Utah, last year, I think. So it was me, Giacomo, Robert Cheek, Corinne Sutton, all sharing an Airbnb, which was basically like an apartment in this apartment building. In the middle of the night, exact same thing happened. The alarm starts going off for the entire building. And I woke up and like there was nobody. Like, Corinne must have still been asleep. Giacomo was still asleep. Mm-hmm. Robert was nowhere to be found. I poked my head out in the hallway. There's nobody in the hallway. I was like, what is going on? Come to find out, Robert was still awake when it went off. So he immediately just like ran out the door. Like, didn't wake us up. Wasn't like, hey guys, the building could possibly be on fire. Come, escape to safety. He just left.
Mm-hmm. You were like walking around a little bit. Corinne and I were just laughing our butts off.
No, you were asleep. Both of you were asleep. Just dead asleep.
But didn't we eventually walk outside just a little bit in the hallway?
No,
I'm misremembering.
You never even stood up. I never saw Corinne. The next day he was like, oh yeah, I heard that shit. I put a pillow over my head. I was like, what?
Similar response. You know what, if it's that bad, I'll wind up getting
I mean, luckily it was a false alarm.
Mm.
Just like it was a false alarm last night. But like, you never know. And Robert would have left us to burn in the building. And I will remember that.
Thanks, Robert.
Anyway, so other exciting news. By the time this podcast comes out, it will be a little bit of old news, but it's new to us, is that we just hired our newest coach, Alice Wilson, who I am like so excited about. Alice is just like chomping at the bit to like change people's lives and their relationships to fitness and nutrition and get them in like outstanding shape. She plowed through our internship.
I feel like she's going to change the way we do things on the inside out too, actually. She's got like a lot of cool ideas that she's already put into action.
Yeah, I think so too. So, let's give her a big podcast welcome to the Vegan Proteins team and keep your eye out for her because I'm sure she'll be making appearances in some YouTube videos, podcasts, etc. And of course, if anybody wants to work with her, like sometimes you just see somebody, you meet somebody and you're like, wow, keep your eye on that person because they are going to do some stuff. And that is how I feel about Alice. She might be newish to the industry, but oh my goodness, like she's going to soar to heights very, very quickly. I'm so pumped.
Me too.
So what the heck are we talking about today?
Ways that you waste your energy. And this is a pretty broad topic, so it gives us a chance to just talk your ear off about it. But there's lots of things to think about when it comes to wasting your energy, especially for athletes or anyone who's just getting more active. The idea is to just like you get more active, you have more energy, so you just keep doing more. You run around, you train hard, this and that. But is the answer when you have more energy to just continue to use as much energy as possible? The answer is obviously no. But the thought here is, well, in what ways are you wasting your energy, right? And how can you plug the gaps so that when you want to do some amazing things with your life that you're able to, as opposed to just spinning your wheels?
Okay. Well, based on that introduction, I am super curious with what you came up with because I had a different interpretation of where are you wasting your energy. So I'm going to let you take the wheel on this one. See, guys, when we come up with these podcast topics, we don't talk about them a lot beforehand. We come up with the topics, we both retreat to our separate corners and figure out what it is that we want to say and what we want to talk about. And most of the time, that lines up and that makes sense and that tracks. But sometimes we show up and we're like, oh, we are apparently about to have two different conversations. So is this one of those times? We are about to find out. But like, we don't want to waste our conversation not being recorded. Otherwise, we'd just be like faking a conversation for you guys, and we don't want to do that either. So anyway, Giacomo, carry on. Tell us more. What are you talking about?
Well, when I think of wasting my energy, I think about, not about being as productive as a human as possible, but that's part of it. The other part I think about is being a person who is satisfied with my quality of life, right? Because if you're not living your life with intention and in a way where you feel good, you're going to wind up wasting your energy, bottom line. The very first thing that I want to focus on is how to manage, well, let's start with the easy stuff. Let's start with time, right? You can easily waste time. Time is a finite resource. So why don't we start with like the most simplest thing of all? Let's just start with how you exercise. Let's bring it right to exercise, bring it right to training, and then we can get into some more interesting stuff as we really get deep into this. And also curious to know where you're going with this, Danny, because I'm looking at your eyes right now and I'm feeling like you're gonna go and we're not just forking, we're literally we're having different conversations. And somehow we're gonna meet them, I promise.
I'm continue, go on.
Anyways, let's start with training. When you're training, one of the easiest ways to waste your energy is doing too many reps when you shouldn't be doing, like junk volume, for example. Junk volume is wasting your energy, right? The idea is if you're not repping out with some quality reps in the gym, then you're going to wind up literally just lifting for the sake of it because you're feeling energetic, because you're getting stronger. And you just wind up literally moving your body around in a way where you're almost like jerking your body around, thus like putting strain on your joints, creating muscle imbalances, using the wrong muscles to do stuff. You'll have limitations, like you can't defy the laws of physics. Once you have mechanical breakdown when you're lifting, not only are you wasting energy while you're training, you're also putting yourself in a position where you can get hurt and limit your potential to get stronger. So that's something I'm thinking about as far as when you're actually training, which hopefully, how do you feel about that, Danny?
Okay, so I'm gonna just take us a step back for a second and elaborate a little bit more on what I am thinking, and you, maybe I'm just missing you here or something.
Sure.
When I think about like what are people wasting their energy on, I think about when somebody has particular fitness or physique or weight loss or muscle building or whatever strength kind of goals that they have, most people, when they have a goal, they're going to kind of lay out a roadmap of how they intend to get there, right? But there are certain actions that can move the needle a lot, and there are certain actions that can move the needle a little. And then I would argue that there are certain actions that are just taking time away from those other kinds of actions. Like there are little things that you can do that you think are moving you towards your goal, but actually all they're doing is sucking up your time and energy and taking away from things you could actually be doing to move you towards your goal.
Such as?
Well, I have an entire list of all kinds of different things that somebody could be doing that I personally think are a waste of your energy, depending on what your goals are. They fall into 3 different camps of like nutrition, training, and mindset. What things are you sort of spending your time and energy on that are not actually moving you forward? So are we saying the same things here?
Possibly. I think we're talking about it differently, but I feel like we're talking about the same thing. But I'm super curious to see what kind of list you got. And
okay,
what
so
your ideas
you want to start with exercise specifically.
Well, we already took it there. You might as well.
Okay, so you mentioned junk volume. I kind of have something in that. So first of all, define what junk volume is, because many people might not know.
Well, take any exercise as an example and think about that movement pattern and doing it with good form. So let's use an easy exercise for creating junk volume. Say a row, right? When you're doing a row, that you can do it with proper form, right? You have your arm pinned to the side of your body. You're creating a certain range of motion, creating certain movement. And at some point, if the weight starts to get heavy, your elbow can start to come out and you're like jerking it up with, you're moving your rotator cuff or you're jerking it up with your shoulder as opposed to training your back muscles. That would be an example of creating junk volume. Like the reps are no longer quality. There's form breakdown, but you're still moving your body.
So I would think of junk volume completely. I mean, that's certainly not helpful. Those are not good reps or anything. But to me, junk volume, there's a certain amount of sets and reps that you need to stimulate muscle growth. But more than that is not necessarily better. Once you find the optimal amount of volume that you need, anything above that is junk volume. So you could think as an analogy, Giacomo's favorite, of junk volume would be like if you went outside and mowed your lawn and you mowed the entire lawn and then just to be safe, you mowed over it again. Like you didn't actually do anything that second time. You just wasted your time doing nothing because that grass was already cut. Junk volume is like that in the gym. It's when people decide they're going to do every single exercise for every single body part, and they really only needed to do like 30% of that to get optimal results. Everything above that is junk volume.
Sure, I get you there. In other words, going past what your work capacity should be to the point where you can't recover from it. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not even about not being able to recover from it. I mean, certainly it could impact your recovery. It's just like, what is the point? This isn't helping you. You're not getting better results by doing more past this point. So why are you wasting your time doing this?
Okay, I'll sit on that. I'll think about that. But yeah, no, I mean, there's certainly many scenarios where I could probably go there and be like, all right, what you're doing is unnecessary. You're literally just, and you may even hurt yourself.
Yeah, and a lot of times I find people are doing junk volume just out of a lack of like education about what those proper amounts of volume to do are. And when I first started writing programs, my programs were loaded with junk volume because I would just think to myself, like, oh, it's a leg day. And I would just start thinking about like all the leg exercises that sounded like they would be fun and effective to do in that day and put them in that day. Or it's a chest day. So we're going to do a flat press and an incline press and a decline press and an incline fly and a flat fly. And you don't need all of that. And by the time you get to the end of it, like you said, those reps are they're just going to suck. Like you can't even push very hard because you're spent. So, but when you know better, you do better. So, yeah. But I would agree with you. That is absolutely a way to waste your energy in the gym. I would say another way to waste your energy in the gym, kind of along the same lines, is just doing too many isolation exercises and not enough compound movements. Isolation movements can be helpful for really fine-tuning a physique, but the foundation needs to be compound lifts. If you are doing all isolation exercises and no compound lifts, well, you better have an injury, because that's the only time that I can see kind of building a program around isolation movements, is if there's some existing injury that prevents us from doing certain compound lifts.
So you're saying compound movement should get more bang for your buck?
Oh, absolutely.
And they should be in the mix at all times, no matter what?
Yeah, they should be the primary. They are the foundation.
And let's define compound movements.
A compound lift is any lift where multiple joints are working at the same time.
This doesn't have to be barbell work only, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
It could be machines, it could be dumbbells, it can be body weight movements even, but multiple joints ought to be moving at the same time. So in a squat, for example, your hip joints move, your knee joints move, your ankle joints move, and all of the musculature around those also work.
Or like a leg press as opposed to a leg extension, for example.
Right. So an isolation movement is a movement where only one joint moves, so like a bicep curl, versus a lat pull down or a pull up where both your shoulders and your elbows are moving.
There you go.
So, yeah, I think that's a mistake, and it's a mistake that a lot of new again, I made this mistake, a lot of new lifters make this mistake because isolation movements are way less intimidating. So a lot of people start there. And if that's your kind of gateway to getting into the gym, that's fantastic. But if you really want to get the most out of your time, you want to progress to more compound lifts.
Each muscle group is going to work to stabilize the other muscle group. And when they work in unison, you're able to stimulate more muscle growth that way. You're pushing harder with your body.
Yeah. What else do you have with your exercise?
Well, what about being on the gym floor in general and like resting for too long or taking too long to get ready or just chatting away, stuff like that? I know this is not really technical, but in some ways the gym is your happy place and you want it to feel social and good and you want to enjoy your time, and you don't want to do the opposite. You don't want to rush through your workout, but you also don't want to lollygag and literally spend an extra half an hour and then one day you turn around and you're like, I can't train 4 days a week. I was like, well, okay, are your workouts taking an hour and a half or are they taking 45 minutes? Because realistically, they should take 45 minutes on the gym floor, right? But you don't want to do the opposite where you rush through your workout and you can finish in 30 minutes. So this is something I think about when it comes to enjoying, making sure you're resting enough, but also just not, how do I say, being so immersed in gym culture, even if it's just for you and you're not necessarily talking to anyone, that you spend too much time in the gym and then at some point you realize like, I can't train. And you think it's because it's the lifting, it's because of the way that you're running it when you're training.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, certainly people can waste time by resting too long or taking too long to like get ready or warm up or but I find that actually more often than not, most people that I talk to are not resting enough. Personally, they're resting 30 seconds in between their sets and they think that that's totally fine. When really it's probably more optimal to rest like 1 to 2 minutes in between your sets. Depending on your goal, that could be much longer rest times that are required. But very rarely would there be shorter rest times required, unless you only have 30 minutes to train, which is something we're going to talk about in the next podcast. So don't worry about that. So yeah, I guess technically, yeah, I would agree with you technically. Here's a huge one. Here's a good way to waste your entire workout. Just waste it. Lifting too light. Lifting too light. Period. End of story. If you are not lifting enough weight so that by the end of your set, you are kind of struggling to get those reps out with good form, you are not lifting heavy enough and you are not going to get good results from those lifts. It's like again, I go back to the cutting the grass that's already been cut analogy. You're just wasting your time. You're just going through the motions. I could do a bicep curl with nothing in my hand right now, but that doesn't make sense, does it? So, if doing a bicep curl with a 5-pound dumbbell in your hand doesn't have you kind of bargaining with yourself by the end of the set, oh, can I get another one? Can I get another two? Then that's not heavy enough for you. And you need to make sure that you are lifting heavy enough to stimulate muscle growth and physical adaptation.
Right. And we like to challenge our lifters by giving them a rep range to push toward to make sure that they're trying to progress. And we also suggest and even recommend that you rate your lifts in whatever way makes sense to you. I remember back in the day, it was as simple as easy, normal, hard, very hard. Just rate them. Mm-hmm. Rate your intensity somehow. Pay attention to how much effort you're putting into it and how hard the reps feel.
Yeah. And if you get to the end of a set, let's say you're supposed to do 12 reps and you pick a weight and you get close to that 12 reps and you realize, oh, this was not nearly hard. This weight was not heavy enough for 12 reps. Dude, keep going. Get some more reps until it feels hard. Don't waste the whole set by putting the weight back down. Just get more reps until it does feel hard. And then next time, you'll just pick a higher weight for that particular rep range. Another way that I think people are kind of wasting their time and their energy, I guess energy is probably a better way to put this, is trying to find workouts for fat loss and things like that. There is no workout for fat loss.
Explain.
There is no workout that specializes in fat loss. That doesn't exist. Fat loss is caused by a caloric deficit largely implemented through diet.
So are you suggesting that there are workouts that are just meant to get your heart rate pumping when you could be getting more value out of how you're training with more resistance?
Nope, that's not what I mean at all. What I mean is there's a lot of workouts out there that are labeled fat loss workout or thigh fat loss workout, and it has 1 million abduction reps and little donkey kickbacks, and it claims that these high rep workouts are superior for fat loss versus a more standard strength training program, and they're not. They're simply purely 100% not. I mean, all movement, I'm a fan of all movement, but to tell somebody, oh, if you lie on the floor and do 1,000 crunches, that's an ab fat loss workout. No, it's not. It's 1,000 crunches. That's all it is. And there's better ways to train your abs than that. And even if you trained your abs perfectly, that's still not a fat loss workout. Fat loss comes from your overall calorie burn and your overall calorie intake, not the training that you do in the gym. So you might as well do training that is optimal for your muscles in the gym and forget this idea that a particular workout will help you lose fat faster.
All right, gotcha. Fat loss workouts are more centered around core training and just doing lots of reps. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. You could Google it. Just Google love handle fat loss workout. You'll get a good laugh out of it. I promise. You will get a good laugh out of it. These workouts don't exist. So 1, trying to find one is a waste of your time. 2, actually doing them is a monumental waste of time. The only time they are not a waste of time is if you are seeing them on Instagram, laughing, posting in your story how stupid this is, and then moving on.
Gotcha.
That's the only time it's not a waste of time.
Okay. Hey listeners, we hope you've been enjoying this episode and we appreciate your love of all things vegan fitness. For those of you who want even more support on your vegan fitness journey, check out our Muscles by Brussels community and become a member. By joining the team, you are one of our exclusive VIPs. As a member, you'll find over 200 macro-friendly, high-protein recipes that can meet any of your meal planning needs. You'll also receive training programs that update monthly. This training has progressive overload built into it, so you can be sure if you're following the program, you are making progress. All of this and more is located inside our Vegan Proteins members only app. As a Muscles by Brussels member, you'll unlock bonus courses, challenges, and more every month. You'll also be invited to our live Zoom video calls, which happen 2 times a month, and are absolute gold to those who show up. And if you can't make the calls, don't worry, you have the opportunity to email us whenever you want. You'll receive a video response to all of your questions from one of the coaches here at Vegan Proteins every time you message us. Members also receive 40% off many of our other services. And of course, our private community of like-minded individuals is like no other. Best of all, you can try this membership out for a full month at no cost to you with this special offer for our listeners only, because we appreciate and want to fully support you. Use the link in our show notes to sign up for your free trial today. We hope to see you on our next live coaching call.
Well, this is kind of an exercise. It's kind of an exercise thing, but it doesn't have to be an exercise thing. It would be like working out in a waist trainer or wearing a waist trainer, like literally at all. I can't believe it's 2023 and we're still talking about waist trainers, but here we are. Here we are talking about them. Waist trainer is essentially like a rubber corset type of thing that mostly women, although I have absolutely seen some men wearing these to work out in, and they do cause water loss in the abdomen area because they make you sweat a lot from there. But of course, the next time you drink a glass of water, it's going to come right back. But you could say this isn't inherently harmful, so what's the big deal? 1, they're expensive. 2, when they are tight, they restrict you from being able to breathe fully, which is going to prevent you from getting enough oxygen into your blood, which you need while you're exercising. They could very well stop you from being able to brace your core properly, depending on how tight they are and how tall they are. So, people could be like, well, what's the difference between that and a belt? Well, the belt you take off. You take the belt off the second the exercise is over so that you can, get plenty of air. Belt is a different, a weight belt is a different story, but a waist trainer, just don't waste your money on them. I'm trying to help you. Don't spend your money on them.
Do people wear vinyl belts, like weightlifting belts that aren't actually good for weightlifting, like those Velcro ones, as a way of mimicking it being a waist trainer?
No.
Or do they wear the actual?
They wear the Velcro belts as a belt, as a weightlifting belt. It's not the same. It's not the same. Waist trainers start right at the under boob area and they go all the way down to your hip bones. And they are just squeezing the life out of you. Mm-hmm. And I know because, dun, 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 I have one, but not for the reasons you think. When I had my skin removal surgery on my abdomen, the surgeons suggested that I wear one for 12 hours a day or something for compression because of all the swelling and water retention that was going to happen at the incision site. So I say this from experience of having to wear them kind of a lot for a couple of weeks after a surgery. They're awful. You can't get a full breath with these things on. A full, proper diaphragmatic breath, not happening with a waist trainer on. And people are wearing them thinking that it's actually going to make their waist smaller. You ever sleep on your pillow funny and you wake up and you have indent pillow lines all over your face?
Yeah, sometimes.
That's basically what a waist trainer is doing. But then it goes away.
Right. Or they're wearing it because they don't want to feel shame, or they whatever. They want to feel a little better about the way they look. What you might not realize is that you could be hurting yourself.
Right. And, if someone wants to wear a piece of shapewear under their clothing, like under a dress or something, for whatever reason that they want to, that's entirely your prerogative.
During your whole lifting session, though, and using it with the intention on it making you slimmer, that's the...
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an exercise one. All right, let's talk nutrition. You got any things people are wasting their energy on with nutrition?
Oh, where do we even begin? My favorite one is decision fatigue when it comes to what to eat, because people crave variety, people get bored, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they also don't want to feel prescriptive about how they eat. Eating the same thing day in and day out is not for everyone, and arguably not for at least 50% of people. You want some variety. You want to be a creature of habit, but you want some variety. But constantly thinking about what you want to eat, not good. Leads to wrong decisions and literally spending time food focused. The other thing, though, is sometimes when you have a real serious goal, it helps to take the guesswork out of things and to stop thinking about things, to just go on autopilot and to eat mostly similar every day. Like, have some sort of routine, have some sort of system built around your eating habits, as opposed to thinking about food all the time, wondering about what you're going to shop for and shopping multiple times a week for food, changing your mind multiple times a day about what you're going to eat and how you're going to eat. Like, all these kinds of things can lead to spending so much time obsessing over your eating habits that you actually wind up, even if you're eating well, like healthfully and in a way where you're eating how much you want to eat on average every day, you're taking up so much of your mental energy doing stuff like this, and your time.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, all of that. I don't think it even comes down to needing to eat similarly every day. I think it mostly just comes down to having a plan and sticking to the plan. If you roughly outline what you're planning to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for that upcoming week, then you don't have to have that inner conversation 3 times a day for an entire week. I'm hungry. What am I in the mood for right now? Oh, well, I could have this. Or you don't have those moments where you get so hungry that all of a sudden pizza is the best option. When you take the time, which shouldn't take too long, to plan out what you hope to have for the week, you really do save a lot of energy in the rest of the week. And you're just more likely to make better decisions. Giacomo's right. Like, the more similarly you eat, generally speaking, the easier it's going to be. But for a lot of people, that is totally not possible. And this is one thing I've learned over years and years of coaching, is most people cannot eat the same thing day after day.
The other thing here that I have a beef with is the complexity that we now have access to because of how plugged in we are with the world. You can literally look at every single gram of what you eat. You can look at the nutrient and the macro and micronutrient value of every single gram that you eat. And you can have multiple entries for every type of food that you eat. And you can have multiple things that you plug this into to extrapolate data on what you eat and how you eat. Like, all these tools, useful, but if this becomes your everyday process, you're going to be putting yourself in a position where you're doing too much. You don't need to be doing that. Like, why waste your time with all of that all day, every day? I don't feel like it hurts to do like an eval and see how you're eating and whatnot and this and that. If that's your process, though, day in and day out, on a weekly basis or even on a monthly basis, honestly, I don't necessarily feel, unless you're like learning about like how to fuel yourself, right? If this is like your ongoing thing, take a step back and think about what you're doing and assess. You only need to check yourself a couple times a year. 4 to 8 times a year tops, in my opinion. Once it's more than discipline and the plan, as opposed to taking that much control of what you eat and how you eat.
Well, I had something similar on my list, and that was trying to hit everything to the gram every day. That is a huge waste of your energy, and let me tell you why. Nutrition labels are not accurate. Like, they're not perfectly accurate, I should say. In the United States, they're allowed to be off by up to 20%. So if you're at the end of the day and you went over by 3 grams of fat, but you still have 6 grams of protein left and you're freaking out wondering how you're going to make that happen, that is an enormous waste of your precious energy. Getting in the ballpark of your calories and macronutrients on a regular basis is going to be more than enough to move 90% of people forward on their goals. And the remaining 10%, listen, they're already in fantastic shape and they're just trying to level up a little bit more. These are bodybuilders, these are fitness models, these are people that just are just like walking human sculptures. Like these are the people who really they do have to nail everything pretty much to the gram in order to keep moving forward. But that's because they're almost done, guys. Like they're almost finished. So for pretty much everybody else, getting in that ballpark is going to be good enough. So I think that's kind of similar to like what you were saying.
Yeah, more or less.
Yours was more like wasting time trying to find the perfect plan, which is also on my list, by the way.
And you're thinking about more along the lines of, I'm losing the train of thought here, but what I'm hearing, if I'm hearing you right, is when someone is being hands-on with their eating habits and they are trying to be perfect with how they, as opposed to consistent.
Yes, that's an enormous waste of your time, your energy. You're going to make yourself crazy trying to do that because nobody can do that all the time.
Even high-level professional walking, talking billboards and sculptures, even when they have to be that dialed in, they eventually develop a skill, those kinds of athletes, where they don't have to be hyper meticulous about being methodical about tracking. They just know what they're doing consistently. And it's just it's like out of sight, out of mind. It's like, I know I'm having a handful of this every day. I know I'm getting an X amount of steps every day because of how much time I spend. They don't start to clock the minutes. They don't start to weigh out the grams. They're just that much in it with their laser-like focus and their discipline. They don't need to be hyper methodical about tracking every little thing. They just know they're doing it right, more or less.
Yeah. Let's see. Other nutrition stuff where I feel like you're wasting your time and your energy are doing things like 1 meal a day or extended intermittent fasting, where, you're only eating in like a 4-hour window, or God forbid you're eating 1 meal a day, or you're eating for 5 days a week, but not eating for 2 days a week. All of those to me are an enormous waste of your energy. They are not helping you move forward at all. And if anything, they could even be harming your goal. And I mean, let's talk about them. They take a pretty significant amount of willpower to do all of those things. That's not easy to not eat 23 hours a day. So you're wasting all of this precious, precious finite willpower to do something that is probably hurting your goals, not helping them.
Or your body goes into energy conservation mode, which thus in turn makes it so that you have less energy. That's a waste.
Yeah, it's not ideal. I would not recommend it. I'm not going to we're not going to start talking all about intermittent fasting and 1 meal a day and variations of this on this particular podcast, but it is certainly not magic. And for many people, it can move them further away from their goals. People are like, Danny, don't you do intermittent fasting? No, not really. I just don't eat breakfast till later in the day because I'm not hungry in the morning. But I also, like, my last meal sometimes is at 10 o'clock at night. So that's just my own personal appetite rhythm at this point. But people who are like eating in a 4-hour window or a 1-hour window, or to me, even an 8-hour window, like, I wouldn't want to do that. And I don't think it's optimal for muscle protein synthesis and building muscle and keeping muscle. So I don't recommend it, but I also think it's a waste of your energy. Other kinds of fad dieting things, like any kind of one food diet. I'm on the banana diet, or I'm on the potato diet, or I'm on the cabbage diet. Like, please don't. What a waste of your energy.
Well, yeah, because that's going to make your choices that much more difficult if you're trying to eat only fat and protein, or only carbs and protein, or no sugar, or whatever it is. Like, there's a difference between making healthy choices and literally eliminating certain food groups or certain types of food.
Which leads me to my next one, which is avoiding foods that you are not allergic to. And I guess with allergic, you could put in like, have a real sensitivity to. But there are a lot of people that I meet who are not eating gluten, or they're not eating soy, or they're not eating grains or legumes or anything like that just because. Like, just because. And I say, "Oh, are you allergic?" And they're like, "No, I'm just doing it because I'm trying to count carbs or something, or I'm trying to watch my carbs."
Well, this is so challenging because your gut biome adapts to whatever you have been eating, and it doesn't like whatever you haven't been eating, even if your body could perfectly tolerate it, handle it, and actually thrive off of it. So I love the idea of science being a thing where it's less wrong, and I love the idea of experimenting, but also know the parameters and what you're experimenting with, right? Because you could easily have.
You can make yourself allergic to some of these things
Sure.
by not having them for a very long time.
Exactly.
A very good example is if I accidentally consume dairy, I am not feeling good. I am bathroom bound for like a day because I haven't eaten dairy in 20 years. Now, back when I ate dairy didn't bother me. I mean, I had really bad acne, and maybe that was correlated to the dairy. I mean, it probably was, but like my stomach didn't hurt. I wasn't like gonna have to run to the bathroom if I ate dairy. But from not eating it for 20 years, if I were to eat it, that's exactly what happens. But people can do the exact same thing to themselves by avoiding things like gluten or soy or legumes or grains for a really long time. You just kill off that gut bacteria that feeds on those things. So then the next time you eat it, you get all bloated and gassy and uncomfortable, thus convincing yourself, "Oh, see, I knew I was sensitive to this. I knew I was allergic to this thing." And it's like, no, you just made yourself allergic to this thing. What a waste of energy, and also how sad at the end.
Please be careful with the word allergic to something. I don't feel like it's necessarily allergic to something.
Sensitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't make yourself, well, maybe you could make yourself allergic to something, I don't know. But certainly like you can give yourself a gnarly food sensitivity.
Sure.
Example, I had a client who was in competition prep, and it was a pretty intense competition prep. And about halfway through, she realized like peanut butter was just too hard for her to have around from here on out. No more peanut butter in the home. She loved peanut butter. After the prep was over and we started like, getting back to normal levels of calories and intake, she started having peanut butter again, and it destroyed her. And I'm not talking about she ate a jar of peanut butter. I'm talking a tablespoon or two of peanut butter was wrecking her guts. And it took months for that to come back. She gave herself a sensitivity to it by taking it out of her diet, which is another argument for why flexible dieting and keeping a wide variety of foods in contest prep is so important. But it's also an argument for why keeping a wide variety of foods in your diet in general is important, so you don't end up hurting yourself eating something later. She can eat peanut butter again now, but it was tough for a minute there. Let's see. I think that a lot of people are wasting their time referring to foods as good and bad. I don't feel like there's any benefit to thinking about foods as good or bad. I feel like that only serves to make you feel shame when you do eat something that you perceive to be bad. It doesn't actually encourage you to be better. It just makes you feel more fear around food and makes you feel worse when you have those things.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying whatever memory you have or whatever food does for you outside of just fueling you up. In other words, like for me, tomato sauce will always remind me of Sunday sauce. It will always remind me of getting together with family. It will remind me of jarring and canning tomatoes. It will remind me of Sunday, just chilling, just having a bowl of pasta. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with having associations and enjoying food just because you have an emotional whatever, or it reminds you of an experience. There's nothing wrong with that. There is something, I feel, where if you avoid a food just because and you feel like it doesn't serve you healthfully, you're denying yourself of being able to just enjoy food for whatever it is, whether it's a piece of candy, whether it reminds you of how you grew up, this and that. You know what I mean? And when you restrict foods because you think that you're going to be unhealthy if you eat them, whether it's not something that is nutritious and, I don't know, quote unquote healthy, or it's just something you're afraid of because for whatever reason, you wind up losing out on just enjoying food for what it is. And you, like you said, you can get, like Danny's saying, you can get into a shame guilt spiral. And then one, that feels awful, even if you don't wind up consuming those foods. And two, if you do, you just feel like crap about it.
Yeah. And I think there are better ways to think about food. We could think about food as more or less nutritious. We could think of it as more or less like soul filling, kind of like the sauce Giacomo was just referring to. I mean, tomato sauce is totally fine for you, but other foods that are certainly more decadent or indulgent might not actually have much in way of nutritional value. But there are other reasons to eat food outside of that. We are all emotional eaters in one way or another, whether we like to think we are or not. And, it's okay. And when you think of things as like, this is an all the time food or this is a sometime food. Like there's different ways to think of it that aren't just good or bad, because then we think of ourselves as good or bad for having those things. And it doesn't actually get you better results to think that way. In fact, they refer to this good or bad, black-white thinking as rigid dieting. And in all of the studies, literally every single study where they look at people who are rigid dieting, like these foods are off limits and these foods are good, versus people who are dieting flexibly, who are thinking more in that gray area that I just referred to, the flexible dieters and the rigid dieters both will lose the same amount of weight. The flexible dieters keep it off and the rigid dieters go right back.
And they're happier.
Because it's unsustainable to think you are never going to have a piece of cake again. And if you don't learn how to control yourself around cake and have normal, reasonable portions of it, cake is going to beat you at some point. And then what? Then you just feel like crap about yourself. So it's really important to try to shake that mindset, I think.
Well, and I am thinking this is the perfect segue to, before we go on too much, I want to make sure we also cover this one here, managing your emotions. I think this is a big one because, one, no one can completely avoid negative thought patterns and negative emotions 24/7. It is impossible. You are not beyond your emotions. So, one, being aware of that stuff, but two, not getting stuck there all day long, every day. And then, of course,
so what is the waste of time? What is the waste of energy?
The waste of time and the waste of energy is, one, not being aware of when your emotions are not like where they need to be and processing that a little bit, like having some space for that. The other is knowing what drives you and what hurts you when you're training and when you're carrying on about your day. Some people may get into the gym and a certain kind of negative or positive emotional headspace will fuel them. Others, it will hurt them. So it's like knowing yourself, knowing what motivates you while you're training, for example, or knowing what motivates you to get the job done. And this is going to look different for everybody. This is where you have to just know you and your personality and think about what is going to put you in a better headspace to do what you got to do and go in that direction unapologetically, So stuff like that is what I think about when it comes to better managing your emotions so that you can be a better athlete.
So I guess we're transitioning into the more mindset stuff. So a mindset thing that I think is a big waste of time is spending time worrying about the scale. Like if the scale is the thing that is worrying you the most, I would highly recommend that you maybe shift your priorities around what your goals are, because while the scale can be a valuable tool, and I don't think it's something that we should just throw out just because it upsets a lot of people, I think we should more learn how to recognize what this data actually represents, which is your relationship to gravity at that moment, the end. But for a lot of people, it is not that. It is the determining factor of how they are going to feel that day. They're going to step on the scale in the morning and they're either going to be happy today or they're going to be unhappy today based on what that thing says. And that is, holy moly, what a waste of time that is. There are so many ways that we make physique and fitness progress that have nothing to do with the scale. And learning what some of those things are, and maybe that should actually be an entire podcast episode, like what are some ways people make progress that are not the scale? Maybe a YouTube video. I don't know. Learn those, man. Like, it's really, really important. And the scale fluctuates all the time. Every day, the scale fluctuates for so many different reasons. Some of them are body fat gain or loss, and most of them are not. Most of them are water retention or water loss from things like a bad night's sleep, waking up really thirsty in the middle of the night and getting a glass of water, being a little bit constipated, or the opposite, where you are in your period cycle. Like, all of these different things are going to affect the scale, so you cannot let that readout be the be-all, end-all for that day.
Are your muscles depleted? Meaning your glycogen stores around your muscles, are they full? Is your body stressed out?
Did you eat more salt yesterday or less? Like, if every time you step on the scale and it's down, you're excited, and every time you step on the scale and it's up, you're upset, it is time to reevaluate your relationship to that scale.
Especially when you try to start to manipulate it too, because now you start to engage in unhealthy behavior, and that can be a slippery slope.
Yes. Which brings me to my next one.
Go for it.
Which is wasting time comparing your progress to other people's progress.
We've justified this, we've attacked it, we've let it go. Oh gosh, it's so challenging, Danny, because it's very tough for someone to know what their best look is, what their best version of themselves is. And it's far be it from me to be like, you know what? Figure it out on your own. You're going to know what your genetic potential looks like. You're going to know what you're going to look like eventually. Like, that's not true. You need something to look at to get a sense and an idea. And typically looking at other physiques can give you an idea of what your physique could look like. It's when you can't separate the two, and then all of a sudden you start to envy someone else's physique or aspire to it, and then you start to sell yourself short on what you're capable of. And you might be capable of certain things with your physique that they're not at all, for example, but when you get hung up on all that time checking yourself by looking at other people's physiques, what that can do to your mindset, my gosh.
Yeah, it's a huge waste of time because you are not them. You are someone else, and you have no idea what is actually happening with that person. A lot of times when we compare our progress to somebody else's, we're comparing our progress to other people who are sharing their progress. There's a survivalship bias here. Who is most likely to share their progress? The people who are being very successful, or the people who are struggling their asses off to move forward an inch? Of course, when people are very successful with whatever it is they're trying to do, they are going to be way more likely to share their before and after pictures, tell you everything that they did because it happened to go well. But for every person who it's going swimmingly for, there's 10 people behind them who are just like fighting tooth and nail for every inch of progress that they're getting. So it is not an apples to apples comparison at all. They could be younger than you. They could have fewer responsibilities than you. They could have a lot more money than you, which actually equates to a lot of things that they probably have access to that you do not. You might have a hormonal issue or an underlying health condition that they don't. You could have a full-time job and 4 kids that they don't. Their gym might just be better than yours. There's so many factors.
And forget the fact that there could be jealousy, resentment, confusion. The confusion lies in the fact that you are not focusing on all the things that you could do to make improvements because you're too busy feeling whatever or just spending all your time looking at other people when you could actually be hacking yourself and figuring out all the ways that you could be improving and getting access to that information on yourself and looking into that information.
Yeah. That's a huge waste of your energy. And we've all done it. So I'm not pointing fingers. I feel like we do this the most when we are having a hard time making progress. That's when we start to see other people's success. It's like the universe just puts it in front of you sometimes. So you're just like, God damn it. Why is that not me?
The universe or the algorithm, Danny?
Yeah. Same diff.
I guess.
Yeah. It's very hard not to do because as human beings, Giacomo and I disagree about this all the time. I am a firm believer that as human beings, we are designed to compare. We are designed to make judgments. That is how we survived the caveman days. But, recognize that we are not cavemen anymore and that we can think higher than that and try to break these patterns that are ingrained in us. You got any more? Because I saved my best for last, so I want to hear what you have. No, do you have anything else? Are you sure?
Go ahead.
You're not stealing the last spot.
I might.
Okay, the very last, and in my opinion, biggest waste of energy. I'm coming for you guys, I'm sorry. It's people who consume a ton of fitness content and don't do anything with it. These are people who listen to endless fitness and nutrition podcasts, YouTube videos, blog posts, Instagram influencers, etc., etc. But when the rubber meets the road, they're not actually doing anything with it. This is the biggest waste of time of all of these.
Headstrong because you know a lot and you have to know more without actually being headstrong by practicing grit and doing the thing, essentially. Or being so closed off because you know more and want to know even more that you cannot get the inspiration, the motivation, the support that you need to do what you got to do.
It's tough, man. Occasionally we'll get on a call with somebody, they're interested in one-on-one coaching. They want to see if we're a good fit for them. And we always have a call with people before we sign them up for one-on-one coaching, just to make sure nobody's wasting anybody's time. We are a good fit for one another. We do think we can do this thing. And sometimes you'll get on the phone with somebody and they know all the right answers. They know exactly what to do. They know what to say, but they are not doing it. They are not doing any of it, even though intellectually they know all of it. And that is always it's just a hard situation to see, because I actually think that it's, I love education. I love information. The more informed we can make our audience, the happier I am. That said, I would rather somebody not know a goddamn thing about any of this and just walk into a gym and just do their best that day. And
versus knowing it all and then
staying behind their computer.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would rather them just trial and error, do every wrong thing until they figure out stuff that works for them than just consume endless fitness content without actually doing it. Can there be a happy
medium?
Of course there can be a happy medium. And, I assume most people who listen to this podcast go out there and do the things. I'm sure that most people do. But I know that there are people that don't, that listen to this and all kinds of other self-help podcasts, but they struggle to actually implement those actions. And I love me a good self-help book. Oh boy, do I love them. And a few years back, I realized that I was consuming a ton of self-improvement content. And every time I'd finish a book or finish a podcast or even finish a YouTube video, I would feel this little sense of accomplishment in the back of my brain. I actually did something. I didn't do anything. I just listened to somebody else talk at me for 8 hours, but the dopamine in my brain was oh yes, read another book. You'll be so much better if you absorb more information. Nope. You have to do it. You have to, and that's the hard part. Listening to this, that's the easy part. Doing it, waking up and doing it, eating the meal that's going to move you forward when you absolutely would rather eat anything else, or getting your butt to the gym when you are just so not interested in going, and then doing it again the next day and the next day. That is the hard part. And even if you do it imperfectly, all of that is the thing that's going to move you forward. All right, moving on to our question and answer segment. Giacomo, this one is for you. I'm new to a plant-based diet and I currently have a pretty dialed in macro program. However, I'm really struggling to find ways to add protein without a ton of fat or carbs or eating a ton of cans of black beans a day. For example, most of my meals throughout the day only allow 10 grams of fat. I'm sure this might be redundant, but any suggestions would be very helpful.
When most of your meals only allow for 10 grams of fat, I would do some meals with maybe have a meal with a little more than 10 grams just to enjoy. And then have other meals where they're almost virtually fat free because the protein source is something like seitan that is pretty much fat free and high in protein. So you could have some starchy carbs and non-starchy carbs like vegetables and potato with your seitan, for example. And it doesn't have to just be seitan. It could be anything that is wheat protein based. And there's lots of packaged products that are. Pea protein is also a fat-free protein source. So anything that's like pea protein based and wheat protein based, you can make this stuff at home. You can buy this stuff pre-made. You can have some super low fat / fat-free meals. And then you can have something else that you can actually enjoy because protein and fat kind of go together. Honestly, they just taste good together and lots of
Everything tastes good with fat.
That's true. But plant-based proteins are not the only proteins that a little fatty taste good. That's just what we talk about, obviously. Like a nice Beyond Burger or Impossible Burger, for example, or maybe something like tofu that's a little fattier as opposed to a can of black beans. You can explore different plant-based proteins that are not like ridiculously low in fat. And I think that's a healthy thing, actually. And then you can have other things like wheat protein and pea protein based plant meat, for example, that are protein dense, and then have those meals be mostly like super low fat or fat free.
Yeah, and when I hear somebody say, my meals only allow for 10 grams of fat, I don't know exactly what this person is doing, but I think about those really old IIFYM calculators where it would calculate the macros you needed to hit for the day and then divide all of those by like 4 or 5 meals or 6 meals per day. So let's say your fat for the day was 50 grams and it splits it up into 5 meals that are 10 grams. I get where it's going with that, but you absolutely do not need to have all of your meals be equal carbs, fats, and protein. Protein, yeah, you kind of want to break protein up pretty evenly, but the other macronutrients, there is so much wiggle room.
Well, and plus it's kind of nice to eat like a nice wholesome meal at the end of the day too. Or maybe to start your day like that, whatever you're in the mood for really, or maybe midday.
Or like have a snack that's just a protein shake.
Yeah.
Should just tide you over for a couple hours and then you have more carbs and fats at later meals.
Or like a fun snack, like hummus and crackers or whatever.
Right, totally.
I don't know.
So I just wanted to point that out. That sounds like they're trying to eat the same thing for every meal, and you don't have to.
Danny, I've been struggling these past couple of weeks to know what is right. Is it better to listen to your body's cues to eat or not eat, or to follow your macros spot on? I've been trying really hard lately to be more mindful of my eating. With that, some days I'm not overly hungry, but still eat to fill my macros. And some days I'm absolutely starving and do everything I can not to go over our macros. In the past, I've had success with eating the exact macros, whether I'm hungry or not. However, lately, this has been causing me to binge like a crazy person about once a week because I'm so hungry or tempted by yummy foods around me that I can't take it anymore.
Oh, wow. This is really good. So I don't have a lot of details about this person, so I'm just going to answer very generally. Generally speaking, if your macros are set up in a way where you are starving multiple days per week to the point that you end up binging one day a week, your macros are probably set too low for you in general. I don't know what this person's goal is. I'm going to just assume that it's fat loss because that's what most people's goal is, for better or worse. And if you're starving most days, I assume that's what this was set up as. But that would be step one. I think the macros are probably set too low. Yes, if the goal is fat loss, you should be a little bit hungry before your meals. That's a pretty good indication that you're headed in a right direction. And everybody has those days where they're just like ravenous for some reason that they can't put their finger on. And, you know, that should be a rarity. That should be a rare occasion. And in those occasions, you know, I would generally say like reach out to your coach if you have one and see what they think. But since I don't know if this person even has one, I would say add a couple hundred calories on those days that you're ravenous. But don't just decide, oh, screw it, I'm just going to eat whatever. I don't think that's a smart move. But my guess is that the calories on the whole are probably just too low to start with. So I would increase them. And then also, if the goal is fat loss, I am a huge fan of refeed days. There should be refeed days in there at least once a week, preferably 2 days in a row, once a week, like a weekend, for example, where you eat at your maintenance levels, particularly to avoid exactly this problem from happening.
Well, it's not just how they're eating and how enjoying food, it's the fact that hormonally you're going to stimulate your metabolism a little bit in a way where you're not going to be as hungry.
Hopefully. I mean, the research on that is still a little bit iffy, but that's, logically that makes sense based on what we know, but even more practically than that, of course, if you have a weekend of 2 higher calorie days to look forward to, you're going to be much more likely to be adherent the other 5 days, But let's assume that everything was set up really properly from the get-go. If everything is set up well from the get-go, I would say do your best to try to eat your macros by the end of the day regardless. Some days, especially when you're first starting, some days that's going to feel like a ton of food. Some days that's not going to feel like enough food. But in a week or two, that's all going to start to level out as your body adjusts to it. It's just that adjustment period at the beginning can be hard. But in this particular case, it sounds like it is not set up appropriately from the beginning and it needs to be adjusted.
All right, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. Please stay in touch with us on socials at Muscles by Brussels, at Vegan Proteins, also at I Am Just Athena. Keep the conversation going with our private community by becoming a Muscles by Brussels member, or just hit the contact button on veganproteins.com. You will get a human response from one of us every single time. I promise you. Once again, my name is Giacomo.
And I'm Danny.
We'll talk to you soon.